Now I want to talk about the fissures in South Korea's democracy. I don't mean here to pick on South Korea's democracy. Our democracy has its own fissures, as we know. It has its own vulnerabilities, and we are seeing that vividly. But the topic, of course, is how South Korea could exploit the fissures, how North Korea could exploit the fissures in the South's democracy. Let's begin with the extreme polarization of the politics there. I often say that to the Korean right, all security threats are seen through the lens of 1950, as if the North Korean army is just waiting to roll across the border. To the left, the threat is within. It's like the Gwangju uprising and frankly, massacre that happened in 1980 under the dictator Chun Doo-hwan. And in the middle, you have a large pool of disengaged voters who can become engaged very, very rapidly in a very connected society, which means a high degree of instability in public opinion. The Korean right and the Korean left each think that their own speech is sacrosanct and that the speech of the other should be criminalized. There is not a strong culture in South Korea that free speech that we disagree with should be protected. The media are not widely trusted. There is a word, it's a portmanteau in Korean called kiregi, which is a combination of the word for journalist and the word for garbage. Kiregi means garbage journalist. I could cite any number of conspiracy theories and disinformation that circulates widely in society before it gets corrected. Frankly, that was happening in South Korea somewhat before we really had the national conversation that we have about it now. Korea doesn't have the protections for freedom of speech that we have. The government will prosecute people there for saying things that it disagrees with. So, one example I would cite is former President Moon Jae-in prosecuted a guy and threw him in jail for calling him a communist. Speech that would be protected in the United States. And I do not by any means endorse current right of center President Yoon Suk Yeol, who jails journalists and has, filed arguably more criminal libel suits than any of his predecessors. Most of the human rights groups internationally see that this is a weakness of South Korea's democracy. And what we will eventually come to is how North Korea could exploit that. And then finally, I have sometimes seen journalists cite the strong protest culture in South Korea as a sign that it has a vibrant democracy. I would argue back that a protest culture can actually be a sign that institutions, the rule of law, the Freedom of Information Act, journalism, and other things that are the institutions that usually show signs of a strong democracy. When those things fail, people come into the streets. So, for those of you who have lived in Korea, it is very common to see phalanxes of riot police downtown. They have whole rows of these large buses that they travel in. The common Korean term for those is takjang. Because of the grills over the windows, it literally means chicken cage in Korean. South Korea has a very strong riot police force because it has strong, angry unions and strong and often violent protests in the streets. There are unwritten rules. People usually don't kill each other, but they will bring pipes and rocks and bamboo poles, and things can get pretty ugly. Next slide, please.